So, as natural bodybuilders, we're taught from the beginning that everything revolves around our recovery, the ability of the muscle to fully recover before you train it again. And this is why most natural bodybuilders can't do double tap workouts twice a day, 6 days a week, thousands of sets, etc. We just overtrain without the use of all the new pharmaceuticals and the peptides and the PEDs, etc. So we've always embarked upon a way to try to train the muscle exactly when it's ready to recover. What if I told you that some of the logic is flawed? It just arbitrarily training a muscle once a week better than training it twice a week or three times a week? What if I told you it was dependent upon the muscle group and your own individual recovery? And all things are not considered the same. What if you're working out and your legs aren't recovered for that following leg workout, but your arms have had too much recovery? Well, there is a system developed to help you utilize specific recovery factors. It's called variable split training. So let's cover it. In a world of enhanced physiques and social media smoke and mirrors, where do you find the truth? Welcome to the OCB Natural Edge Podcast, the official voice of the world's largest drug-free bodybuilding federation. From the science of the shred to the grit of the stage, no secrets, no substances, just the edge. Now, I'm often asked about the science of bodybuilding and a lot of different questions on recovery, etc. And the most common questions reflect around how many days per week somebody should train if they're natural, how many reps per set, what type of volume should it entail. Again, all recovery-based questions. People expect some sort of one size fits all answer, fits all response or a solution to their training. And in the area of training science, there have been a great many breakthroughs over the last 50, 60 years. Science in the real world doesn't always get along. So you may read a research study that says you need X amount of recovery, where in reality, you might need Y amount of recovery. There's also the problem of all the media introducing training programs. They're always talking about the next great thing, the whatever. Social influencers abound on YouTube with all these different things that they've figured out, how to isolate this small muscle group and how to train to the maximum with this. And I mean, it just goes on and on. However, there's usually some sort of monetary investment, or the person is utilizing PEDs for their progress. Now, the fact is that most trainers are either undertraining or overtraining individual muscles on the current 7 day per week program. I've done a lot of research over the years, and one of the things I stumbled across decades ago, probably 30 years ago now, was an obscure article about variable split training. And basically, the premise was each muscle group responds at a different rate of recovery. Legs take longer to recover than chest. Chest takes shorter time to recover than back. Biceps and triceps, as long as all volume and intensity is kept relative and you're not overly training or going into a deep spiral of overtraining, arms can recover in a couple of days. So I started thinking about this and started mapping out ideas on recovery, volume, and intensity to see how this could be a format that could be utilized in a training program where you could get maximum recovery utilizing all three factors, being able to recover your endocrine system, being able to recover your muscular system, and being able to recover your nervous system. What people don't realize is that there's three different levels of recovery that you need to recover from a training session. As aforementioned, the muscle. Muscles recover in a shorter period of time. The endocrine system. The endocrine system has pulses of hormones that are based on the type of training you do. Heavy high rep squats will release a lot of testosterone, where a lot of supersets and giant sets are good for growth hormone. Now, these are very finite releases, and they're not going to compensate for an overabundance of PEDs, or they're not going to create a magic gain. However, if you overtrain the endocrine system, it will begin to suppress hormonal levels. This is key with testosterone. Competitors who overtrain and overdiet have a reduction of testosterone. People who train properly have an increase in testosterone. We've all seen this in our contest cycles, in our pre contest. If you get blood work done 6 months out and blood work done the day of a show, you see those changes in hormones. And the other thing is the nervous system. So the first thing that has to come to effect is you need individually to know how many days per week you can train. In my humble opinion, I have found that a maximum number for a natural competitor is 5, with 4 being a good rule of thumb. Once you know how many days per week you can effectively train to maintain your endocrine system and your nervous system, you also need to look at the volume that you put into the workouts. Now, the fewer muscle groups you train, the greater your volume and intensity can be. The smaller number of muscle groups that you train, the higher your volume and intensity can be. An example is the 1 day per week training sessions that have been so popular for years and years and years, where you just train back 1 day per week and you can kill it with a gazillion sets. And then you train chest the next day, gazillion sets, and so on down the line. That is not effective for a natural bodybuilder. You detrain the muscle over a certain period of time. Now, granted, that works well with your nervous system and your endocrine system recovery, but you're not taking advantage of the muscle system. So we've already stepped back and we said that 4 to 5 days per week is ideal for recovery of the nervous system and for the endocrine system. And now we've covered the fact that the fewer muscle groups you train, the greater volume that you can do. But how do we break those muscle groups up? And what would a workout schedule look like if you were going to be training muscles based on their individual recovery? Now, before we get into the odds and ends of the program, I'm sure this information is going to be met with some great enthusiasm and soon after forgotten by most. Why? Well, the number one reason is as we get into it becomes complex. Humans like a one size fits all solution. We also like order based on a 7 day week, where you can set your training program up and your rest days up in a 7 day rotation. Your muscle groups are going to scatter based on recovery. And this is where some confusion sets in. Also, how often and when you train those muscles, because now we're talking about muscle recovery, not endocrine and not hormonal. So from this point on, we're going to talk specifically about our muscle recovery. So you also have to be aware of your individual recovery patterns. Some people can respond from a heavy leg training session in 3 or 4 days. Other people, it might take 5 to 7 days. I know some people it takes almost 10 days after a killer all out balls to the walls, squat workout, leg press, etc. High level of volume, high level of intensity. It takes much longer to train. Lower levels of intensity, lower levels of volumes, you recover faster, but it's still finite for you. Each individual has their own recovery pattern. So everything we talk about as far as scheduling muscle groups in has to be based on your own individual recovery. Don't just cut and paste and copy what we talk about today and try it out. If you know that it takes your back 5 days to recover and we start talking about training your back every fourth day, adjust any schedules you might have. If I tell you that I can train my biceps every other day and have them recover, but you know it takes 2 or 3 days, then make those adjustments. So everything has to be tailored to your needs. Now, this program is not easy to follow, but I assure you the results are far greater than the traditional methods. I've used this system myself. I've used it on clients back in the past, and it's always worked for them. It's always increased the rate at which they're putting on muscle mass, or it has improved their contest preparation. Now, why do people come off of it and why is it mainstream? For the reasons that we talked about earlier. It just doesn't fit into a regular 7 day cycle where you're always training X on Monday, Y on Tuesday, and so on down the line. You need a schematic to follow it. But if you're data driven and you're recovery driven and you want to try something new, let's talk further about the VST. So to understand VST, you first got to look at the term split and how it's used in most traditional training methods. The term split refers to your normal training schedule, how you train your body over the course of a traditional 7 day week. The example is a 3 day full on body split workout where you train the entire body Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Personally, one of my favorites. Or a 4 day split where you go upper body, lower body, and rest day, upper body, and lower body. On a 6 day split, you might train one muscle group each day of the week, as we talked about earlier. These are all traditional splits. Variable split means that the program has no constraints, no repeatable pattern. On a traditional split, Monday is always devoted to one thing, Tuesday another thing, and so on down the line. On a variable split training program, every time you walk into a gym for a training day, it's totally different training. It's different muscle groups. There could be more muscle groups that you're doing or fewer muscle groups, which means the volume will correspondingly go up or down, and a lot of other variables. It makes the system fun, and it also makes it recovery based, the recovery of the individual muscle. Now, the hierarchy of the system is not day specific, it is muscle groupings. This program is designed to prevent overtraining and undertraining and to be fun. In VST, the recovery time for the muscle is assessed independently of all other factors. The recovery time is used to base when you're going to train that muscle next. The absolute optimal time is the point in time between the training stimulus, your workout, and the return to homeostasis or your pre training norm. Each muscle has a point of overcompensation where another bout of training or workout should be best planned as you are on top of the training bell curve. If you think of it as a bell curve, you want to hit it at the peak. You train it too soon, you're at the lower end of the bell curve. You train it too late, you're at the late end of the bell curve. You want to hit it at just the right point so the muscle can continue hypertrophying or growing and expanding. Recovery time, as said, is dependent on the individual. But as a rule of thumb, the larger the muscle group, the longer the recovery rate. If we look at the body as major muscle groups, let's go with five: chest, shoulders, back, legs, and arms. The larger muscle group, or the largest, the legs, would take the longest amount of time to recover. Also, to break the legs down further, you have the quadriceps, you got the hamstrings, you got the glutes, you got the calves, you got a lot more muscles that you're training within that element of legs. The same is true for back. That takes the next longest recovery pattern because the backs, you have the traps, the lower, the lats, you have a lot going on in the back. Chest, a little bit less time because you just have the upper and lower. Shoulders, you do have three heads of your delt and your traps. But traps can be included with back work or with shoulder work, but you do have more muscle groups, but they're very, very finite and everything kind of overflows with each other. And then arms, biceps, and triceps. They recover the fastest. Now, what I've found with me personally is that my arms can recover, my biceps and my triceps can recover in about 2 days. My shoulders, about 3 days. My chest took about 4 days, sometimes three. Back took about 4 or 5, and legs sometimes could take up to 7 days. So those were my individual recovery patterns. So this is why whenever I set off to do a set split, doing a 4 day per week cycle, let's say a Monday upper body, Tuesday lower body, and so on down the line, whenever I did my second lower body workout or leg workout, I did it much lighter and with much less intensity to make sure the legs recover. I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. All I know is when I did switch to variable split training and put my legs on a once every 7 day cycle, I had renewed growth. And I'm talking about coming upon variable split training when I was already an advanced bodybuilder. Most natural bodybuilders are going to attain all the muscle size they're ever going to have, or at least 80% of it, within the first 3 years of systematic training, if done properly, if done correctly, and nutrition is on point, and you stay consistent with it. I had been training for over a decade. And when I came across variable split training, I had an immediate increase in muscle size and a jump of about 5 to 8 pounds in my competition body weight. This is simply because I started following the recovery patterns and I didn't have to overtrain or undertrain a muscle. So that was it for me. Those were my specifics. Those were my timelines. You know your body, you know your timelines. So you need to fit it in your recovery as it works for you. So smaller muscles have shorter recovery times. But why would that be? Because larger muscles, like legs and back, reach much, much deeper muscle fibers that also require more neurological recovery. Remember, neurological recovery is also a big factor of that. The more neurons, the more muscle fibers floating in a muscle group, the harder it needs to be trained, the deeper you need to go, and the longer recovery it takes. Biceps and triceps have fewer. Therefore, they require fewer sets to stimulate growth and they can recover in a greater period of time. So the whole point of VST is you're training with optimized recovery pattern of each individual muscle. Now, a few other caveats here on that overcompensation or the correct time to train. It's affected by things like age, your training age, which is different than your neurological age. I'm a 61-year-old man, yes, but I also have a training age of about 45, meaning I have been training hard systematically and continuously for over 45 years. Also, it's dependent on the load placed under the muscle, the diet, the sheer muscle size, the intensity of your contractions, all those things play a factor in it. I dare say that the longer your training age, the fewer sets you actually need to do, and the greater your loads can be to affect the same stimulus. When I was doing a VST type style workout back 25 years ago, I would probably tailor my chest workout to be about 8 to 10 sets. Now, at 61, going back into utilizing VST again, it's more like 3 or 4 sets. My training age is greater. My muscle fiber density is greater. My chronological age is greater. And therefore, I need less sets to get the same stimulus and less work to get the best recovery. So, again, all those factors come into play. So let's set up our system. The first thing we want to do is determine how many days per week we want to train. Now, we already said earlier that we're going to go with 5 days for this example. So let's pre program in our rest days. Everybody likes to rest on Sunday. Sunday is always a great rest day, but you need to throw another one in there. And so, for the sake of this argument, we're going to go with Thursday. Now, step two would be to turn around and program in your individual workouts. Now, how are you going to start this? I suggest that you start going with a traditional 3 workout body part split. So you'd set up your first day with the VST program doing chest, shoulders, and tricep, your traditional push movements. And then your next workout, you'd go with back and bicep, your traditional pull movements. And then your third workout, you can go with legs. Then you take a rest day. After that, the programming begins. Knowing your own recovery patterns, you just go and program in all your next chest workouts. Let's say your chest recovery pattern time is 4 days. Every 4 days, you count and you add a chest day. Arms, say it's every other day. Every other day, you add a bicep, and every other day, you add a tricep. As you can see with this program, we separated biceps and triceps, but when you lay it all out over a month-long cycle, there are going to be some times where you're training biceps and triceps together. There's going to be other times where you're training triceps with back, biceps with chest, etc., because it is all eclectic, all based on your individual muscle recovery time. And then breaking that down every fifth day for back, every 7 days for legs, and you come up with basically a 4 week cycle of what's going to be worked out on those workout days. Now, with what we talked about, here's an example of my cycle below. This is how I set up my VST to embark upon my new renewed VST training that I'm going to be doing for the next 4 weeks. This is for me, and it works individual for me on this rotation. Now, the other thing you have to factor into your rotation is your volume. As you can see, there are days that I'm training a single muscle group. On those days, I can really jack up my volume, which makes it a lot of fun. Those are the days I could do something like a German volume training at 10 sets of 10. On the days where I'm training 2 or 3 muscle groups, I'm going to bring my volume way, way down and maybe go with a higher intensity type workout, maybe some pre-exhaust supersets where I'm going to do cable crossovers before inclines, but I'm only going to do 4 sets, etc. That's also the beauty of this program. It makes it so fun because every workout is distinctively different. Now, there is one thing I will say that you need to monitor, and that is your load on your base exercises. I always recommend that you have a base exercise for every muscle group. That is your fallback. That is your thing that you're trying to maintain your most strength on. Let's say for me, it's incline bench press. That's just my chest workout. I'm always monitoring the load I have on my incline bench press. I'm always trying to increase that load or maintain at 61. My increased days are pretty gone. But if I maintain that load, I know I'm maintaining my muscle mass. That's my focus. So at least one chest workout out of a 7 or 10 day period is going to have an incline bench press based on the caveat of maintaining that load. The rest of the chest workout could be whatever I want it to be. So that's kind of the only caveat that I have. Other than that, my workouts are wildly eclectic. I could go in and do 4 sets of 10. I can do 10 sets of 4. I can do whatever I want to do as long as I maintain those base loading patterns, at least one workout per week for each major muscle group. And the rest of it is all based on fun. Now, most trainees prefer to spend far more time on exercise and weight selection than muscle groupings and pairings in a recovery based program. Humans gravitate to what's comfortable, and what's comfortable is a 2 on, 1 off, or a 2 on, 2 on split. That's fine. But the more time that you spend in your comfort zone, the less time you spend in your growth zone. That goes for workouts, training, life in general. The more time you spend being comfortable, the less time you grow, the less time you spend stimulating something. So simply planning out a month in advance on a calendar takes all the confusion out of the VST program and allows for a greater variety in your workout. It puts the fun back in the workouts, and it makes each workout distinctively different. So give it a try. And if you try it, put your comments down below. Let others know how it worked for you. Share some of your splits and what worked for you. My 5-day split is for a 60-year-old man. There could be a 19-year-old out there saying, I can train 6 days per week on a system like this and still grow. I want to hear hear what you have to say. Now, I had the honor of being part of the 22nd OCB Spirit of America in Mashpee, Massachusetts this past weekend. The show, it was electric. The competitors were amazing. Everyone was having a great time. And at one point, I went and I hit the staff lounge to take a moment to myself and decompress. And I saw a sign on the wall. And the sign said, don't fear failure. Fear being in the exact same place next year that you are today. And it struck me because I'm a sucker for those short, insightful messages like that that have some deep value and how to live a better life. As I was driving home, an old song came on the radio, and it was by a group called the Waterboys. Now, they're a somewhat obscure group, and it was a somewhat obscure hit, but bear with me for a second. The song is The Whole of the Moon, and the basic premise is that there are two paths that two people take that are part of the song. One person plays it safe and nibbles at life, and the other throws everything at it, 100%, takes the hard roads and sees so much more. One sees the crescent, the other sees the whole of the moon. Now, these are motivational reminders that stagnation is far more dangerous than making mistakes. It's a call to action. If you're not growing, changing, or making progress, you risk repeating the same life patterns, the same behavior, the same workouts day after day that are getting you nowhere. If you don't like where you are in life, then go somewhere else. Life is about growth. It's about evolution. It's about stepping out of a comfort zone. It's about getting out of the place you're in and not being stuck with the same workout, not being stuck at the same routine, not being stuck in the same job, not being in the same routine or mindset if it's not making you feel better or be a better person. It can be more harmful than trying something and failing. Failures are learning steps. Stagnation is missed opportunities. And that brings me back to those amazing competitors at the Spirit of America. Like most events, more than half of the 80-plus competitors were first-timers, people who decided to take the hard road, to diet on boring food, to do boring cardio, and to put everything into their training, practice their posing for hours, shave their bodies, put gunk on, and be up there as some shiny symbol of what the human body can achieve. They wanted more than the crescent. They wanted to see the whole of the moon, and they did. And talking to them after, not one person regretted the experience, whether they came in first or eighth, it didn't matter. They did it. They knew they did it. They did something that less than 1/10 of 1% of the population does, and they grew from it. Now, if you're listening to this right now and you saw that moon, go find out what else you can do in life and tell me if the experience met your expectations. That's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate your time, and I'm going to be doing my best to keep bringing you some content of value. So please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, stay hungry, stay humble, and stay natural. Sully out.